Alright, what do we got? Alright.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, well, why don't you just ask them to take it back?
Alright.
Just did it back shorter, easier.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let me call this meeting to order. This is the full standing committee on House Standing Regulated Industries Committee. We have one bill in front of us today, and this would be HB 324 by Representative Gravely. This is a full committee today. This is for action by the committee and questions and testimony from the committee members. This has gone through some pretty extensive subcommittee hearings on this issue to try to get it perfected in some shape, form, or fashion. This is the culmination of an issue that the House and the Senate did a few years ago about the use of low THC cannabis oil for medical purposes. Not to be misinterpreted by a lot of folks. It's not recreational marijuana. I don't even think you can get a buzz off of this stuff, but it apparently has certain medical qualities that have a positive effect on certain diseases. For those of us who have been here for a while, I think what got most of our attention was when we saw children suffering from seizures that came up a few years ago, and I think that grabbed the heartstrings of a lot of people to say, well, maybe this isn't as bad as folks think. The legislature had passed this issue about the use and the distribution and the prescription as to the person, not the oil itself, for certain diseases. But still, Georgia's in a situation that's kind of an interesting scenario that we pass this, but there's no way that they can legally get this type of oil. I understand that there has been bootlegging operations amongst family members. They have cook-off parties to get this oil, sort of like a Tupperware party in the old days, if anybody remembers what Tupperware was. I understand there's been a lot of, black marketing or smuggling of this type of stuff. And Representative Gravely was one of the key instigators with a senator that they had study committees around the state last year. And I do believe this is a culmination. Representative, the bill the substitute in front of us that I think came out of the special subcommittee would be LC 363922S. Is that correct? That is correct.
If you say that one more time, 363922S?
That's correct.
Yes, sir, that is what I have.
And before we start, I do want to give my thanks to the members of this committee that served on the subcommittee, the special subcommittee, to look into this, to be sure that we're trying to do all things proper so that this doesn't have unintended consequences. And that being said, are you ready to present your substitute, Mr. Gravely?
Yes, sir,
Have
Mr.
at
Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee, thank you very much for being here this morning on this beautiful day. I did want to, before I get started, because you mentioned the subcommittee, Mr. Chairman, is to make sure that the members are aware of who served on the study committee this summer. So just briefly, it was a joint study committee between the House and the Senate. My co-chair was Senator Matt Brass. It was also from the Senate side, Senator Butch Miller, President Pro Tem, Senator Ben Watson, Mr. Dale Jackson, and Sheriff James Woodruff from Troup County. The House members I co-chaired with Senator Brass, Representative David Clark, Chairman Alan Powell, family advocate Ms. Shannon Cloud, who is with us today, and Ms. Susan McWhorter, who was a former member of a medical cannabis company, served on the study committee. During that study committee, we heard testimony from families, from those in favor of the measure, from those opposed to the measure, what it would mean to have safe access here in Georgia, the ability to obtain legal, safe, lab-tested oil for those who are legally registered under our Georgia law, that they would not have to go to another state to obtain this oil, or to obtain really marijuana, bring it back across state lines, which would be in violation of federal law. And when they get here, if they were able to obtain oil somehow in another state, or if they purchased recreational and brought it back and then had to make the oil once they got here. What we wanted to do is find out what would be the best way for Georgia, for these families to be able to not leave the state, but right here in our state know, number one, what they're getting, number two, where it came from, and have the assurance that it was made in a proper, professional manner in a lab-tested, controlled environment, so that the product that they were ingesting, either for themselves or for a loved one, they could have that type of assurance that it was made in the proper way and that it is safe. We did come out with a study committee report that recommended a hybrid system, which was kind of a best practices from across the states that have medical cannabis or some type of marijuana measure within their state. For the committee's information, there are 46 states, and you have a sheet in front of you. It looks like this. And if you don't have one, I have some extra copies. But it lists what states are smoking, what states kind of have. Do they have smoking? Do they not have smoking? Currently, 46 states do have some type of medical cannabis or marijuana legislation in place. 10 of those states are recreational. 36 states do not allow for recreational. So that's in front of you if you'd like to further review that. The bill that we crafted, it's been years of a culmination of ideas, thoughts, best practices, and really looking at how do we get the 8,400 patients on our registry the ability to buy this oil in their state. One thing over the past 2 days that I want to make sure all of you have access to is I've left some handouts on your desk from Emory University, Dr. Larry Toon, who is the professor of psychiatry and neurology from the Emory School of Medicine, who's associate medical director of the Fountain View Center for Alzheimer's. Also, we had testimony from Leading Age Georgia, which cited Dr. Oliver Glass, a geriatric psychiatrist fellow with Emory University. And then also, one of the testimonies we received during the study committee was from Dr. Ben Thrower, who is with the Shepherd Center and is dealing with muscular sclerosis and the use of CBD, THC oil, and the positive effects that Dr. Thrower has concluded how it affects his patients. So as we walk through the bill, I'll go through and say what we have here in House Bill 324 and why we think it is an appropriate measure for Georgia, why we think it will allow for the patients that we have here in the state to be able to do exactly what we were set out to find, and that was how did they get safe access. So I'll start with this handout, and if anyone needs one, I've got these here as well. It's a summary. Bullet point 1, it establishes an in-state cultivation and distribution program. It creates an 11-member low THC oil license oversight board. It creates an Office of Low THC Oil Control. It establishes 5 Class 1 licenses. It also establishes 5 Class 2 licenses. It establishes 10 safe access retail licenses, which would be a total of 60 state safe access locations across the state, because you do get the option with each of the class license for retail dispensaries. It requires all products to undergo third-party safety and efficacy testing, and it does require an approval system that tracks all plants and products from seed to sale. It requires 24/7 secured facilities with video monitoring. It also establishes a timeline to ensure licenses are approved by January 1 of 2020, and that products are available to patients within 12 months from license date. And it focuses on getting approved patients access to medicine while also preventing products from getting to those not allowed to have it. And I think that's a wonderful segue for me to say, and I want to be clear about this, from the very beginning, from House Bill 1, well, from House Bill 885 in 2014, the first bill that Secretary Alan Peake, Representative Alan Peake, submitted that did not make it the first year. This has never been about recreational or the smoking use of marijuana. Not one measure that has ever come through the House has ever tried to slip that in. It has never tried to propose that. This has truly been about the oil and the oil only. And we have remained consistent to that mission statement from the very beginning. We simply have a law in the state of Georgia that we say as a body, and the governor signed into law, that we recognize diagnosis. And you also have that sheet. It looks like this. It's kind of a history of patients and how they would sign up. That we in Georgia recognize that cancer with end stage or the treatment produces related wasting illness or recalcitrant nausea and vomiting, ALS, seizure disorders, multiple sclerosis, Crohn's disease, mitochondrial disease, Parkinson's, sickle cell disease, autism, Alzheimer's, AIDS, epidermolysis bullosa. The doctor is not here to help me with that one. Peripheral neuropathy, Tourette syndrome, and any patient in hospice care, PTSD, and intractable pain. We as a state have said that it is legal for those with this diagnosis who have been approved and recommended by their doctor can possess a low THC medical cannabis oil. Nothing more. They can't possess any smoking mechanism. They can't possess any food products. They can't possess, one of the most common things is they cannot be in possession of gummy bears. And in the possession, it has to be in a identified medical bottle, much like you would find in the pharmaceutical industry. And you have to be able to identify this. It cannot be more than 5% THC. That's what we've said that they are allowed to have. And the problem we are here today to hopefully fix is the fact that they cannot access it anywhere. They can't get it anywhere. Some of you have interacted with patients. You maybe know some patients. You have family members that know some patients, or you have constituents that may be suffering from one of these diseases. I believe the tragedy is that some can get it if they're lucky. Others just simply cannot. I have a gentleman in my district who is an investigator who said, I support it. My son has autism, but we do not have a card, and we do not seek to get a card, because if we did have a card, I would not know where to get the oil, and I wouldn't know what oil to get him. So therefore, although I support it, and although I wish we could have some direction, I simply I wouldn't know. We would have a card with no access to the medicine the card would allow him to have. So, Mr. Chairman, at this time, I will stand for questions. I do have the amendments that came from the subcommittee. There were 10 total amendments, and I think that the amendments we accepted, and I appreciate the author of the majority of the amendments because I believe it cleans the bill up even tighter. I believe that it focuses on what we're trying to do, and that is simply to provide access to a safe lab-tested oil.
Very good. Thank you. When you said you had the amendments, were these for souvenirs, or are these amendments that were already incorporated into the,
Souvenirs, scrapbooking, anything, you know,
so
something
they've
like
already
that.
been incorporated?
They
or if
have.
they did- Or if they
Yes, sir.
didn't pass?
Yes, sir. In
Scrap.
case any members of the committee just wanted to know what the amendments were, I thought it might be appropriate to have them, just in case they wanted to see or
Very
ask any
good.
questions.
Mr. Ridley?
Thank you, Representative.
Get you, get you.
Representative Gradwell, thank you
Yes, sir.
for all you've done on this and done education for me to be part of this.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. One question I got, I want to just go over just for the record in public right here where we all are. Tell me how you obtain a medical card, and do you have to, is it by law in this, that you have to have a medical card in order to buy this?
Yes, sir. Well, on this sheet right here, I'm going to read from this sheet here. That's not in the bill, but I am going to, and I'll make sure you have this sheet. That was laid out in House Bill 1, but it says any physician licensed in Georgia can sign for a patient. If the doctor has not enrolled patients in the low THC registry system previously, then that doctor, he or she, will have to register first. So we have a registration of the doctors who are signing for these cards, and get a login for the system. The process is necessary for the state to verify that the doctor is licensed and in good standing with the Georgia Composite Medical Board. The verification process typically happens immediately when requested by the physician. The registration process for the patient is very simple. The forms and a lot of useful information can be obtained at the Department of Public Health. And then it also has a website for the link that the patient would click on and read the required steps. Once they get the sign-off from the doctor, the patient or the caregiver must fill out the low THC oil waiver form. The doctor submits the physician certification form online, and then the card request is processed by the Department of Public Health.
Thank
And so, yes, sir. And so to answer the second part of your question, the way we want this to go in Georgia is that only licensed card holders would be walking into a facility, would have to then show their card in order to purchase the oil. What we don't want are facilities that are open to the general public, that they can kind of come in and just peruse and see what it's all. What we want are people only with the card, patients going to purchase the oil, going in to receive the oil. Those patients and only those patients.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Hawkins?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, you've done a really good job on simulating this bill and addressing some issues that had bothered a number of people in the state of Georgia, and which was dealing with leading to recreational marijuana. You know, the original bill was pretty tight as it was. If you possess over 20 ounces in the state of Georgia, you have now committed a felony, and that's pretty strong. What I want to mention to you is something you and I have talked about offline, and I wanted the rest of the committee to hear this and the people out in the audience. I think along the way, and hopefully on our side of the Capitol, we can consider at some point, maybe before rules, adding some language in where a pharmacist will be involved in some way in the oversight, or be available to be consulted if there's any type of reaction to other medications. I think it's just another piece that ensures the public that this is not going to be a way to go to recreational marijuana. If you could do that, I think it'd be great.
Absolutely, and I would like to continue working with you to see how we can integrate the Georgia Pharmacy Boards or some type of system that would do, if it's complementary to the bill, that would allow for that. So patients would at least have access to be able to talk about titrations of different medications.
Great, yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Jones?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for bringing this bill. We've talked about this. You know, I've been a supporter of this issue back when I joined the House. One of the items that we've talked about, and one of the concerns that we have as a general public, is we're going to have 10 grow houses, I guess is the street vernacular perhaps, and our collective concern is how we're going to control what is grown in those licensed Class 1 and 2 houses to be sure that the marijuana plants themselves don't make it to the street as then saleable as recreational. We've covered that issue, and I believe I know the answer to that, but I think that's an important, very important control point that, particularly for our law enforcement community. My sheriffs are objecting to this, and I understand their law enforcement concerns, but you've explained to me what I believe are some very good and tight controls on how we're gonna prevent these plants from showing up on the street. Would you please explain that?
Absolutely. What we want to make sure specifically, and when you say, when you think of a grow house, it's been talked about vertical integration or single dispense license, which would be a license for specifically just growing or a license just to process. What the 5 licenses, both large and small, that's what's known as a vertical integration model. That means that everything happens in one facility. The reason for that is that you want to have that seed to sell. You want to have fewer hands touching that. You want to make sure that that environment is controlled. We also want to make sure that those plants are grown within the facility. And remember, this is not an outdoor grow. We passed a hemp bill in the House the other day. That can be grown outside. This is not going to be grown outside. This is inside in a controlled environment with 24-hour video surveillance and security. I know that the sheriffs have opposed it, and I believe their director, Terry Norris, is here, and he has been more than willing, and I very much appreciate the time that we have had wonderful civil conversations. He's a friend of mine, and trying to get to a point to where I want to make sure that the local sheriffs or local law enforcement has access to these facilities, that the growers will understand that law enforcement number one, has a desire to know what's going on in their community and has access to the facility if they wanted to make sure that inventory needed to be checked, if they wanted to be presented the print-off sheets as well. But that happening in one location is very important, and I want to tell you why. If you were to distribute just a grow license, you would have to grow those plants in a facility. There's no processing within that facility. So in order to get that product to a processing facility, you would now have to take seed, or you'd have to take stalk, leaf, and bud over our streets, roads. They would have to leave that facility. At that point, I think that's too much liability. At that point, you I think would have a hard time maintaining control of where it's going from point A to point B. The only thing that should be leaving a facility, a grow facility, is low THC medical cannabis oil. That's the only thing that should come out of that facility. Everything that is not used in that byproducts, the leaves or stalk, should be incinerated within that facility, disposed of within that facility properly, so that none of that extra product, none of that leftover product can be used in any form. It should be disposed of properly, and it should never ever leave that facility. So I want to continue working with law enforcement to ensure a level of assurance as much as we can that they know that wherever these are located, they will have access to it, and they will be able to inspect, they'll be able to have a relationship, if you will, with those that are going to be in their community, because it first has to be approved by the community if it's going to be in those communities. The community, whether it be the city council or the local board of commissioners, would have to extend a letter of support before they could even locate in that community, and hopefully through that process of approval that they will have that interaction with either the county sheriff's office or local law enforcement.
So, Mr. Chairman, just a brief follow-up, if I may. So just to kind of cut to the chase.
Yes.
These are laboratory environments
Yes.
where growing, processing occurs. Nothing leaves those facilities except the finished product. Nothing leaves those facilities, no street usable
That is correct.
marijuana, recreational marijuana leaves those facilities. Very tight controls in a very tight laboratory environment. Is that correct?
That is correct. And if I may follow up, these individuals that will receive licenses will have a tremendous amount of financial capital invested in obtaining these licenses. I would not, none that I have spoken with or we've heard testimony from would want to jeopardize the hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars that they have either invested or in capital to produce this medicine would put it in jeopardy so that someone could get access to recreational, and then the bill also goes over the penalties for those that abuse that. Also, this is not going to be, these laboratories aren't PVC piping with plastic around it like you'd see at a traditional greenhouse. Black lights or anything. This is not what those facilities are. I hope that doesn't disappoint any members of the committee, but that's just not what this is going to be.
Would you be saying that they're not gonna be, that this wouldn't be a product, that it'd be like the old days when the kids used to jump the fence to steal the watermelon?
I would say this is exactly not that product.
All right, good. Say number 25, who is that? Mr. Jaspers.
Thank you, Mike, for all the work you've done on this. Would you look over on line 292 for me?
Yes, sir.
And, you know, it's throughout your bill, every time we're talking about licensing, and it says, you know, an employee, an applicant demonstrating lack of felony convictions. And I guess I want to understand, except for felony convictions that are greater than 10 years old. Because as you and I both know, we all know in here that felonies are various. You know, some of them will be related to illegal drug sales, or could be. And this, as it's written, would say you've been an illegal drug salesman, your conviction's over 10 years old, you could be involved in this.
Yes, you are correct. And some of the companies, I am happy to further work on that to the committee's pleasure. But we thought at some point, if you had somebody who was either employed by or working within the industry, if they had the knowledge that would be required, we didn't want to prohibit them from being involved. But I'm happy to continue whittling this down if it pleases the committee.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, I mean, I'm new to the dance.
Absolutely.
And to me, that is a big issue. I think that because felonies do have such a vast,
Absolutely.
and you know, and if there's technology based on an illegal drug person, I'm very, I don't know, just very uncomfortable to me. I'm fine with the rest of the bill, Mike.
Absolutely.
I'm good with it. That just seems like kind of a, if criticism can be brought from law enforcement or individuals in the community, that's it right there.
Well, and just to let you know, we copied that language from the federal farm bill dealing with hemp.
Well, that's fine, but that doesn't mean we have to do that.
Exactly, but just so that you know kind of the origination of that, how did it end up in this
But
bill?
if I'm not mistaken, that's related to hemp,
Yes,
not this.
yes, sir.
So I think there's a big difference.
Okay.
And, you know, Mr. Chairman, I'd love to see that in the various spots of this bill removed.
Well, to my good friend, if you would look through that bill while everybody else is speaking, identify those, and you're quite welcome to get rid of probably the best expertise of folks who's probably grown illegally for years. Number 28.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Jaspers touched on the exact subject I just wanted to further his point about, that is my concern about the criminal background checks on line 290 to 293. And I guess by analogy, we were in the regulated financial industries world, we require criminal background checks and fingerprinting of bank, not only the bank employees, but the bank owners. And does this speak to the regulatory, or is anywhere in the bill that we're going to be knowing that the people that are actually investing in these operations have passed sufficient criminal background checks as well? I do like, that's a question.
And correct me if I'm wrong, thank you for the question. 290, copies of recent criminal background checks performed by the Georgia Crime Information Center for all owners, officers, and employees of the applicant demonstrating. So If we want to expand that
Well,
to,
that, it gets back to Representative Jaspers, like, that it ought to be, I would take it to the same, degree of inspection as you would any financial, any of the regulated financial world, be it banks, money service businesses, money transmitters, which you gotta worry whether there's nefarious activity going on those type of businesses. On the cash side of the equation, I'm not exactly sure how to clean the language up, but I would like for it to see that it be at least as stringent as the financial services industry.
okay.
It may have a follow-up question?
Yes, sir.
So, again, I wanted to speak to this, the pharmacists. Can you walk me through, will it be legal for pharmacies to have this front of store sales or not?
Well, they wouldn't, under this bill, they wouldn't have a license. And they wouldn't be, I mean, they would have to convert their pharmacy under the regulatory process that the bill lays out.
Because, again, it doesn't make sense to me why there wouldn't be a carve-out for, somebody that's in the trade of dealing with controlled pharmaceuticals to not be able to have, frankly, granted a license. They've already proved their professionals in the
If I might
field.
answer that question, it's because of the wisdom or the ineffectiveness of the federal government. When they categorized marijuana as a Schedule I drug, the same as heroin and such years ago, that still has not been changed. And a legitimate pharmacist cannot sell a Schedule I drug. The same reason that under the prescriptive way we do this, physicians can't prescribe THC oil. But what they can do is they can prescribe to the individual that has an acceptable illness, that they can then seek it out.
So it's just a workaround.
Yeah, from that Schedule I designation, pharmacies don't carry Schedule I products.
And one final question, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Sir.
Getting back to the retail part of it, as I understand the bill, it won't be just the walk-in retail stores, but it will be home delivery as well.
Yes, that is in the bill as well.
Can you walk me through why the home delivery piece of it is so important?
You're going to have patients that cannot leave their home. If they want to spend more money to have a family member, if they can, go pick it up, but the family member may not have the card. So if they can't get into the facility without the card, so those folks, or maybe you have a patient that's living in North Georgia, but one of the retail centers that specializes in the strain that is most effective for their diagnosis is in South Georgia. We want to make sure that that individual has the ability to access the oil that's best for their diagnosis.
And then these will be direct employees of the licensed retailers then, correct?
Oh, yes. Yes, it won't be third-party contractors or anything like that.
Thank you for answering my questions.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Dr. Mitchell.
Mr. Chairman, I think I've been placed in an untenable position to be able to defend ex-felons here, but that provision that has been referenced is placed in many states that do allow this in their states. I think it would be hypocritical of me to be a sponsor and co-sponsor of Representative Ballinger's bill, which will allow for expungement 10 years after you complete your proverbial debt to society, to be able to get your records expunged, and not advocate for this particular position, in that once you've done your time, with the ravages of opioid addiction and crystal meth addiction, I think we need an opportunity for people to get back on good terms with the state. Whereas such, I think this is a very good provision.
Any other questions? Is that a statement or is that a question?
That is a statement and probably a prelude how I'm going to vote if we put up a vote to amend this.
You can certainly have the ability to make a subsequent motion at that proper time
Good,
for an
Mr.
amendment to an amendment.
Mr. Chairman, I'm proud of how the author has come forward with the bill at this point and would be ready to make a motion do pass as is.
That's not in order at this time, but I'm sure it will be shortly. Mr. Carpenter.
Yeah, this is more of a statement as well. I too I think we live in a society where after 10 years, you know, there needs to be a little forgiveness. So, thank you.
Chairman Collins.
Well, I just want to make a statement of the committee that we've heard a lot about, oh, this is not going to lead to recreational marijuana use, and I think we all know that and understand that. But I want to remind members of the committee that people who use marijuana recreationally don't have a problem obtaining their product in our state right now. The families who want this CDB and this low THC have a problem. I just want to remind the members of the committee of that.
Very good.
Also, I want to echo the comments of my colleague, Representative Mitchell there. I think a lot of times we get held up on that felon conviction, but you have to look at the bigger picture. And I believe in grace and mercy. When I open my Bible up, I think about that quite often. So that might be something to think about as well.
All right, do we have any other questions from any of the committee members? Is that so? All right. Let's see who I can pick on here. Ms. Earhart, would you be kind enough to read something for the committee? On line 28 through 35, starting at the word "the." Would you read that to the committee members?
28 through 35.
Yes.
The General Assembly finds that thousands of Georgians have serious medical conditions that can be improved by the medically approved use of cannabis, and that the law should not stand between them and treatment necessary for life and health. The General Assembly finds that the purpose of this act is to allow the legitimate use of medical cannabis for health care, including palliative care. The General Assembly finds that this act does not in any way diminish the state's strong public policy and laws against illegal drug use, nor should it be deemed in any manner to advocate, authorize, promote, or legally or socially accept the use of marijuana for children or adults for any non-medical use.
Thank you so much. Very clear voice, and that is existing language in Georgia Code and the whole purpose of everything that's been done and continues to be done. All right. We do have another question down here. That would be, yes, Doctor, please go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At the proper time, I'd like to move for adoption.
All right. Let us see where we stand at. Number 28 again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do want to ask, and this is a serious question to the author, and I'm not, lines 280 through 283, just talking about this, it says sufficient documentation to prove that there is a $5 million cash bond payable to the state of Georgia or an irrevocable letter of credit can be obtained within 30 days of licensure award. Is this, are you going to control by rules and regs somehow the terms? Is this going to be a payment and performance bond or a fiduciary bond? What are the terms of the bond that you're requiring?
The oversight committee that is mentioned in the bill will set rules and regulations and promulgate those. Yes.
And they will come up with the rules of exactly whether or not payment and performance or whatever.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for answering that question. Good.
Yes, sir.
Let's see. Chairman Jaspers.
Yes, sir. Appropriate time, I'd like to make an amendment to the sub.
All right. Well, if you'll hold that for just a few minutes, and we will probably be ready for that. Now, any further questions, statements from the committee members? If not, Chairman Collins, what was the desire of that special subcommittee?
The subcommittee met and heard testimony last Friday for about 2.5 hours. We met again yesterday. We moved to pass the bill out of the subcommittee and on to the full committee. It was unanimous.
And that would be LC 3922S.
Yes. as amended, substitute to House Bill three
And
twenty-four.
you're making the motion.
So moved.
And do we have a second? We have a second. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is the time. Chairman Jaspers.
I'd like to make an amendment to the sub 3922S on line, at the end of lines 293, 397, and 436, after the word old, add the word and are not drug related. And on line 603, at the end, provided it is not drug related. Or as I've learned to say, Mr. Chairman, or as best said by the Legislative Council, and in the final draft.
Very good. All right. So the meaning of what your amendment is that it would not prohibit a felon as long as that felon was not created by virtue of being into the illicit drug business.
Absolutely. You know, we know there's so many ways to be a felon today that should, you know, just really specifically looking at those involved in the drug trade.
Very good. All right. Does everybody understand Chairman Jasper's amendment? All right. And he's moved on that amendment. Do we have a second? Second. All right. Any further questions?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to offer up an amendment to the amendment.
All right. This would be the proper time.
After where it says or drug related, I'd like that. I'd like or drug related removed.
That would be what we used to call, if I'm thinking without seeing it in print, I'm thinking this would be what we used to call catfish amendment.
That's exactly right, Mr.
Hold
Chairman.
still, little catfish, while we gut you.
Mr. Chairman, you've been here quite some time.
Yes.
Back in the days when we really could amend bills on the floor. But the reality is, Mr. Chairman, I do believe that the amendment, while well intended, certainly eliminates a class of Georgia citizens who, in an effort to redeem themselves, will be excluding from employment opportunities that I think that in all reasonableness, we should give those folks an opportunity. All other provisions of the bill will prevail in as much as if they commit illegal acts, they will still be held responsible. What this kind of bill does is simply precludes them from earning a living, honestly.
All right. I think I understand. You have a heart of gold. If I could make a suggestion that you might want to get the council to see, and it might help your amendment to the amendment, that you would qualify as Mr. Jasper's amendment has said, unless that felon of a drug conviction has received a pardon. In most cases, convicted felons who are walking the straight and narrow, that they have proved to the Board of Pardon and Paroles that they have gone without sin, and under investigation by them, they've received a pardon after a series of years. Would you consider that? If not, I'll be glad to see if you can get a motion and a second on your amendment as stated.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, the subcommittee chair, Representative Collins, did an extraordinary job fielding any number of amendments, withstanding a very lengthy debate in an effort to perfect the bill. What the provision that we're talking about states is that we're talking a decade after this person has given up, has cleaned themselves up, and or make sure that they've paid their proverbial debt to society. I think this is a reasonable provision. The bill is reasonable as is.
So then you wish to stick to your amendment?
I do, Mr. Chairman.
All right, do we have a motion on the gentleman at number 19? You're making that in the form of a motion. Do we have a second to
Indeed.
his motion? Second. We have a second to that motion. All right, the posture we're in at this point on the amendment to the Jaspers amendment. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Overwhelmingly,
Show of
yes,
hands.
Mr. Chairman.
Would you like a show of hands?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman.
All right, all in favor, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Shame on
Opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I believe the nays have it. Good effort, Mr. Mitchell, good effort. Back to the original amendment. Is there any other amendments to the amendments? We have a motion on the Jaspers amendment. Do we have a second to that amendment? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
Do you want to show of hands on this one?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, certainly.
All in favor say aye.
Hands up.
All opposed, raise your hand. 2, 3, 4. I do believe the ayes have it and the Jaspers amendment is adopted. Do we have any other amendments to this bill? Do we have any other comments to this bill? If not, the action at this point is all in favor of the passage of LC 363922S as a committee substitute incorporating the Jaspers amendment. Say aye. Aye. Opposed? And the ayes clearly have it. Your bill is going to the Rules Committee, Mr. Gravely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ladies and
members of
gentlemen,
the
I'd like
committee.
to thank everybody in attendance today. And we will be having a meeting. You've got 10 minutes to get to session. We'll be having, this committee will be meeting on Tuesday, where we'll be having several other bills as we move them forward. Yes, sir. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here.